All right, Doug, we're back after a pretty long delay. Mostly my fault, I have to say. I was ill for a little bit, but feeling good now. Feeling good. So thanks, Doug, for being here today. Um, I want to talk about people ask a lot of questions about living situations. Like, is there a place that you can go internationally or domestically where maybe with what we think is coming in the world, where you can sort of avoid it? And this is something that you and I talk about offline together all the time. And we were just having a conversation about it. And I just wanted to bring some of that in here. And it started with me asking you if you're planning to come back to the US this summer as you normally would.
Hmm. Yes, and I'm on the uh, I'm on the fence about that because we've talked about traveling in the past, but look, when I first started flying, all you needed was your passport and to be at the gate before they pulled the ramp up, and I mean that literally. You could run to the gate, and there you were, and you took your seat, and it was a very, very simple thing from start to finish. But now, anytime you're getting on a plane, is almost like you're in Saigon in 1975, the general chaos, and your papers have to be in order and stand in lines. And I really have come to despise flying, not to mention that while you're on board the plane, you have to wear these silly masks. And I understand now that they're moving to frustrate people like me who will take their mask down and just hold a drink in their hand
Yeah.
while they're reading the book, because obviously you're flaunting the system. So you have to put your mask up in between sips or in between mouthfuls. So this is getting completely out of control. And the fact that all these chimpanzees are anxious to report you if it looks like you're not playing by the spirit of the ridiculous rules. And now they're actually talking about two masks is twice as good as one, and three masks are even better.
Better.
I mean, it's reaching a crescendo, but how much worse can it get? So anyway, for all these reasons, I don't really want to come back to the US and subject myself to that but I may have to, because I'm also, as we were talking about, I'm selling the farm, it's not a farm, it's a ranch just outside Aspen, because the place has changed so totally. I really don't want to be there anymore. I mean, it's no longer the land of soft snow, hard drugs, and casual sex that it was when I first moved there. It's now become a locus of class warfare between the billionaires and the welfare people. And you can qualify for subsidized housing in Aspen, incidentally, if you earn $150,000 and you're a lawyer. You can still qualify for subsidized housing in the town, of which there are about, and this is an accurate figure because I got it directly from the last mayor. It's probably larger now for that reason. There are 2,500 so-called employee housing units in Aspen, a town of 6,000 to 8,000 people, 2,500 units that are government subsidized. Look, it's not the town it used to be. The people that come in for, anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a riff about Aspen and why I'm leaving it, but that's why I'm leaving it. It's just not the place that it used to be. Of course, no place is, everything changes, but it's changing in a way that I just don't like. So to answer the question, am I going to come back to the US? For what reason? Well, one reason might be to buy another house some other place in the country. I'm thinking about Virginia, either around Charlottesville or on the shore of the Chesapeake or one of the rivers that flow into the Chesapeake in Virginia. So I'll have to, and I'm looking at some houses via Zillow. Apparently millions of other people are doing exactly the same thing, not in Virginia, but to transplant themselves. And But, so much of this is a matter of economics, Matt, because it occurs to me that the average person, and I used to be one of them, has an apartment and has an income that's enough to pay the rent and support himself, but he doesn't have any, he doesn't have the assets to do anything else. He's kind of stuck like a medieval serf. So I guess this has been quite a soliloquy on my part, I can say. The answer to the question as to where should you go and what should you do, a lot of it depends on how much money you have.
Right. And if you don't have money, right now, and I mean, just depending upon your age, it can certainly make sense. It could be of no fault of your own. If you're of a certain age, certainly to not have any assets grubbed together yet. So if you're younger, certainly that's certainly what I think was the case with me when I was younger. But when you don't have that, skills is the thing, right? You got skills are your skills and energy you can trade for capital. And I think that people don't have, if they don't have capital today, they don't have income that's substantial enough to start to change things for them, and they aren't actively focusing on skills and development of skills or trying to create value in some way in order to change that dynamic, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble, because I really feel like, it does feel like the world's closing in a little bit on us. I mean, do you feel that too? Do you feel like this, did you feel like the world is getting smaller all of a sudden?
Yeah, there's no question about it. Because when I was back in Aspen, back in the US actually for 6 weeks, a couple of months ago, it was pretty obvious that your neighbors were watching you to see if you were the type of person that wore a mask. And if you didn't, you might be an antisocial personality. They had to watch, see something, say something. I
Right.
mean, that started with the phony war on terror, but now it's been extended into the war on COVID. So
Right.
yeah, the place is changing. And all these people, the same kind of people that, Germany, highly civilized society, quaint little villages, watchmakers, bakers, everybody could read, land of, Wagner and Schiller and Goethe. Who would have thought? But when the political climate changed and Adolf was elected to office, the people that supported him came out from under their rocks and crannies, and they overwhelmed the rest of the country. And I don't see why that can't happen in the US. In fact, there's every indication that it is happening. In fact, when the US takes this turn for the worse, which it's doing, it's likely to be worse than it was in Germany in the 30s and 40s.
Why?
Why? Because the Americans have been indoctrinated by their public schools for decades now with a common core curriculum where they're taught the same thing. The teachers are taught by the people above them. Look, in the colleges, for instance, almost all of the professors are at least cultural Marxists, if not actual Marxists per se. I say that because I was a trustee at two separate colleges. One, Northwoods University, which is kind of a technical school, and I didn't get very involved there. But the other was Washington College in Maryland, the 10th oldest college in the United States, for what it's worth, and the only one that George Washington actually lent his name to. And I spent a week on campus and got to know a lot of the professors, and this was 20 some years ago. And even then, these were not the kind of people that I wanted to go out to dinner with, even then. And it's much worse now. And it's true throughout the higher education system. And high school teachers take their cue from these people, and so do the grade school teachers. So kids are just indoctrinated overtly and subtly in all of these anti-American, quite frankly, cultural values. And so I think it's worse. It's going to be worse than it was in Germany in the 1930s. We can't make a comparison to Russia in the 1920s and 30s because the average Russian was just a peasant and uneducated, much more so than the average German was in the 30s.
Right.
But yeah,
With the,
I it's going to be ugly.
I wonder with the, maybe comparing or maybe thinking about the Cultural Revolution in China, the way that there was an indoctrination among so many people into Mao's ideas, and Mao as almost a deity among especially the younger people, during that period. I want maybe if you have what happened in Germany and you add some elements of the Cultural Revolution to it, where the people it's driven in great part by the people, not just by the state, not this top down view from the state, but really, I think I told you about my girlfriend's aunt, who has a vivid memory of being raised in China during the Cultural Revolution, of her mother being dragged out of school by, some 13, 14-year-old boys, um, taken over, put her on an outdoor cement ping pong table, had the slate, in front of her, admitting her crimes, against, supporting the old ways in some way, and, being beaten by those boys. And she was one of the lucky ones. I mean, the head of the school, she was the principal of the school, but the actual president of the school, they called him, they killed him. They beat him to death. So, and that wasn't, the state wasn't there. It wasn't the police. It wasn't brown shirts. I mean, it was the kids.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that that I've read about China in those days. And of course, it's true, it's been said, and it's true that the most dangerous creature to have ever walked the face of the earth, including the T-Rex, is the young unmarried male. So sure, it could absolutely happen in the US. And I think it's on its way to happening now as we speak. I mean, the reaction to the events of January 6th, which I believe were grossly overblown by the media, are an indication of that, where kids are being encouraged to turn in their parents if they were there. And yeah.
Well, and there was a lot of, social reward for doing so. I mean, they were applauded on social media, the people who did these things. So you got to expect there's more of that. And, those are close ties, obviously, but we're talking about before, that your neighbors, just being concerned about your neighbors, paying attention to your business. And I think one of the biggest differences between now and, the see something, say something of the post 9/11 era was that there's like this empowerment of the individuals, where they feel so self-righteous because, they have the armband on, I mean, the face mask, and they can shout you down. And before it was like, you didn't know, you just see somebody maybe behaving suspiciously and maybe you felt like you should have reported them to the authorities. But now it's clear, I'm good, you're bad. And I should, for the community's sake, step up and make sure you know it.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And this is as we were talking about a moment ago, it's especially a problem for somebody that is young and has not put together much capital. Because look, when I got out of college, the one thing that was on my mind was putting together, at that time, $5,000 was a lot of money. And I figured if I could put together $5,000, that's going to keep me going in between opportunities and odd jobs and God knows what for a year, wandering through South America. And then I thought I'd head to Africa after that. That's a whole nother story. Today, to have the same size grub stake, now you're talking about $25,000. I don't know how hard that is for somebody to put together today, coming from nothing. But the thing is, even if you have it, my idea was, okay, I'm simply going to hitchhike and backpack all the way. It's great because you can meet really interesting, you can meet some not so interesting people too.
Yeah.
But it's you want to go where the action is, you want to meet as many people as possible. And So it was a good plan back then, but I don't even know if you can hitchhike anymore, quite frankly, in this environment. It's so fear laden.
Right. Yeah, I think it'd be very difficult. I mean, I think not only, I mean, there are also lots of laws against things like this. I was driving through Colorado not long ago, and I saw a guy who was walking along the interstate, was trying to hitchhike from the interstate, and that's of course that's illegal.
Yeah.
And a cop went up, pulled up behind him, and was harassing him, trying to get him to move along, stay off the concrete, move off onto the grass area on the side, and basically get out of there. So I mean, there's so many things are illegal, at least in the US now, that maybe used to be okay, or people didn't always travel only on interstates, which is mostly what people do now. Most travels on the interstates versus the state highway systems or things like that, where hitchhikers still could operate actually. And and that's before you get all these safety considerations about that people might have about, I mean, we're being trained right now to think that any other human is a deep and real present danger to our health. I mean, that's what they're trying to teach us.
And it extends to crossing borders, because if if you're a young person and want to have a great adventure by hitchhiking through South America, which I'd suggest is a first step, because Africa's a little bit more going off the deep end. So how are you going to cross the borders? I mean, a lot of these times you have to have your COVID papers in order,
Yep.
and in order to get the test, costs what, $100, $150, assuming you can get the test any place that's. I mean, it's really made mobility impossible. We're being re-medievalized at this
Yes.
point.
Yes, that's a great way of phrasing it. So explain what you mean by that.
Well, one of the many problems with being a medieval peasant was that you had to stay more or less where you were born. And as time went on, there was fear of what was over the hill. Maybe it was dragons. Maybe it was people that were going to kill you. So you pretty much stayed where you were and kept your place. And if you didn't keep your place, I mean, your neighbors, or certainly the feudal lord, would come by and show you what for. I mean, this is not the way America used to be. You'd get in your car and you'd go anywhere.
Oh,
That's not so much the case anymore.
it isn't, but this is why I bought an RV the other day. This is what I was explaining to you. I felt like I felt trapped, and I'm not trapped. I have a good life in a nice environment, but I'm used to being able to travel a lot, and so I want to see actual humans. So how can I make it so it's less of a, I'm not basically working against myself, thinking that there's dragons over there. Like I don't want to deal with the airplane rigmarole with the testing and the masks and all that. I don't want to deal with it. So then I basically is, forcing my own choices. I'm sort of making my life smaller in a way, because I'm sort of avoiding these inconveniences. But I bought that because I thought, we can go wherever we want and in great comfort. Don't have to worry about masks. We don't have to worry about anything, and so I think that might be a little gateway towards some freedom temporarily. But I think that's going to be cracked down on too. I really think that there's a limited period with that.
Yeah, anyway, if you're just driving around to amuse yourself, you're burning our nation's natural resources in the form of gasoline and rubber. And that doesn't seem quite right.
Supporting the economy.
But, here I am. I'm on a great place in the Uruguayan countryside. I have absolutely everything that I want. But frankly, I find that I don't go anywhere anymore. Because if I want to go into Punta del Este, the nearby city, it's about 35 minutes down the road. Right now, I'd find that half the restaurants are closed, and they do have social distancing in the remaining restaurants. And Punta is famous for its art galleries. They're all closed. I mean, I really don't want to go into Punta. It was one of the jet set capitals of South America.
Yeah.
Now it's just dead and kind of depressing, quite frankly. So I stay here on the farm. It's very pleasant. I have everything I want, but it's a new normal. And
Yeah, and I'm so you're doing the same thing that I'm doing, essentially, is sort of self-selecting into a form of isolation from the world because the inconveniences of association with these things we're used to doing, going out to dinner, for instance, the inconveniences are so big that it's not worth the hassle. It's not worth the hassle, and so we just keep opting out and opting out of that. And I think opting out is generally a good strategy to things, but I wonder. I mean, I'm just trying to be aware of the fact that I might be pulling myself out of things to such an extent that it negatively affects me. You know what I mean? Where I really like, there's nothing better than having a really intellectually stimulating conversation with, with someone. Like there's in person, there's just nothing better than that in my mind. I love that when that happens. And I'm not meeting new people now. I'm not out in the world. You know, and there's no, I mean, when I met you in Argentina in Buenos Aires, I was walking out of my hotel and you were walking down the street in front of me. Now, of course, I knew of you, but like that serendipity of meeting, that's maybe I maybe don't believe in serendipity, but these things that sort of weird things, like confluence of events that come together and create amazing opportunity if you're willing to go with it. That's all gone in a world where we kind of close ourselves off from the world.
that's right. You can forget face-to-face conferences basically at this point. Maybe things will get better. I mean, come this summer in the Northern Hemisphere, but then there'll be a new wave of COVID or, uh, I mean, the people that like to control other people have found this biological thing to be so very effective. I don't think it's going to go away. They can come up with a hundred excuses that sound credible to the Capitacensi as to why they have to do what they're told
Right.
in a new way. And like I said, if you don't already have capital put together, it's going to be hard to break out of your apartment and do something, uh, including starting a business and being an entrepreneur.
I think so.
Unless you can work online, of course, but let's admit it, being online doesn't really produce much stuff. It doesn't, you're not growing things, you're not building stuff, you're not creating anything other than just bits and bytes. That's fine. But, it's like, you know, everybody can't be
A blogger.
exactly. I mean, exactly. It's like everybody having a laundromat and taking in everybody else's laundry.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is what the young people today, like, I think take a cue from Eric Hoffer, learn how to weld or something. I think those skills honestly are going to be, and they are already in such high demand. And, especially as things, maybe if the economy gets worse and people can't replace everything all the time, instead have to repair things, like these basic skills, I think are going to become in vogue again. And I think, we'll see a resurgence on that among young people. I really do believe that they're going to be drawn to those manual labor skills again.
Especially when the financial markets collapse,
Right.
which they will at some point, not soon, I hope. I'd like to fill the bag a little bit fuller before they collapse. Thank you very much. But when they do, my God, then the cat's really going to be out of the bag. I mean, people that thought they had at least something aren't going to have anything at all. Their pension's not going to be there. Their social security checks are going to be inflated out of existence. I mean, we're really looking at the potential for genuine chaos. And of course, when the going gets tough, people have been trained to look at the government as the way to solve the problem, as the magic cornucopia. So yeah, Germany in the 1930s, here we come. I feel very confident about that at this point. So apropos what you said earlier, I think the thing to do is to make sure, since politics are the biggest danger you face today, the biggest risk, more than the markets, you've got to diversify politically. Well, okay, move from a so-called blue state to a red state. Okay, that's good, but you're still in the US. I mean, moving from Prussia to Bavaria didn't help you much in Germany in the 1930s. So it's the same kind of situation. So you've got to have a second crib in another country, and better if you can have a second passport, because You look at your US passport and it says right there, property of the US government, and they can invalidate it electronically. It's not a question of the physical document anymore. When you cross a border, it's all computerized. So you better have a second passport if you want to go anywhere these days. And most people just aren't thinking about it. This is the 11th hour as far as I'm concerned.
That's true. One of the things that's kind of kept me from really taking action on that now is I'm playing the script a little bit forward, where there's a vaccine passport that is it's all connected globally anyway, and it seems like that vaccine passport will be assigned to an identity and will kind of supersede the nation passport. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm just thinking too far ahead. Anyway, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe like with my RV, I have it as an interim way to increase my current level of freedom, and having a passport might not be a solution for 10 years from now, but it might be a good solution for the next 2 years, So maybe I'm just not, maybe I've been thinking narrowly about it.
Well, it really is important to, if you're in a financial position to do so, and it all boils down to that, is to have a second crib in a different political jurisdiction. And I've written so much about this in the past, all over the world, looking at countries. And, as a speculation, I mean, I landed on Argentina 20 years ago for all kinds of really very good reasons. But I underrated the stupidity of the average person. I know you should never do that, but I did. And I liked Argentina so much.
Yep.
But then what did they do? They elected these Kirchners and reelected them and so forth. I don't know which way Argentina is going to go at this point. And here I am across the Plate River in Uruguay, quiet, backward, peaceful, hopefully for the indefinite future, in Uruguay. But where can you go? You can run, but you can't hide, like Joe Louis said.
I really think that's the case now. I mean, because I had always envisioned an economic crisis of some kind that would be really limited in the consequences that would come from it. I mean, it would cause bad government behavior, certainly chaos within a country, but I didn't imagine it would bleed over everywhere. But this has. I mean, because this isn't this COVID. The COVID hysteria makes it so that this is the case everywhere in the world. I mean, it's not just in the United States. I mean, the fact that they're mask wearing in in Uruguay, they have social distancing at restaurants. The art galleries are closed in Punta del Este. I mean, that tells you a lot. And when I was in Colombia over Christmas, a deeply Catholic country that loves to go to Christmas mass and see and engage with family over Christmas, that there was a lockdown where you weren't allowed to go outside at all from I believe it was 8 p.m. on Christmas Eve until 6 a.m. on the 26th of December. That country they just accepted it. So it's everywhere.
It's amazing. Well, of course, it's well known that the virus is especially deadly
At night.
6 a.m. But apart from that, yes, people will accept and do absolutely everything. So I don't know. Well, one thing we were talking about is it's nice to be around like-minded people. And of course, that's one of the reasons why I founded La Estancia de Cafayate in Argentina. Great place.
Beautiful spot.
Potential to be Aspen-like, kind of. And, but everything falls apart. People eventually come there that, I don't know. It's nice to be around people that you trust and you enjoy their company and people that can bring something to the party. But one of the few laws I believe in, as I've often said, is the second law of thermodynamics, which basically says everything falls apart after time, unless you have adequate outside inputs of new energy.
Right.
So it takes work, I guess. I don't know.
But I've heard a lot of positive things about L'Estancia de Cafayate right now. I mean, that people who are there, who we know, who are really are happy they're there, really quite happy they're there right now.
That's true. The guys that I know are really happy to be there, and yeah. So maybe it wasn't such a bad. And most of the bad eggs that came in, and they've kind of gone away. So I guess these things have a way of solving themselves. But I'm here on a farm by myself in Uruguay, and not
Instead. Yeah.
Estancia. So who knows? Well,
But I do think the idea of being around people that are like-minded, and if as we were saying earlier, if the idea is that your neighbors, like during the Cultural Revolution, might become your enemy all of a sudden because they realize there's some ideological difference, there's some space in the way, between the way you think and the way they think, and they're empowered by, the society essentially to lash out at you, then I think being around people that you can trust is really, really important. I don't know if it'll ever be as important as it might be in the next couple of years here in the US.
well, as I was saying, I'm thinking about after I sell the ranch in Aspen, where to go. And I kind of like the Tidewater area of Virginia. I like the Charlottesville area of Virginia. Uh, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, what about Northern Virginia? Because I lived in Washington, D.C., idiotically, perhaps, for about many years of my life that I live in D.C., over 20, certainly. And, but then, wait a minute, that's the last place I want to go. I mean, all those people, they're all government employees. They work in and around the government. Therefore, they share the values of the government with each other, and they really do. I don't know what I was doing there for all those years. Um, so you want to move someplace, like you said, where the culture is more suitable. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's right. But then again, getting down to people that don't have any money. Well, it's like Ayn Rand said uh, about the subject of having money. I listened to her at her last speech, and some question from the audience was, well, Miss Rand, it's really nice that you say all these things, but what if you don't have any money? What about the poor? I mean, this was supposed to be the zinger question. What about the poor? And her answer was perfect. Make sure you're not one of them. And that's all she said. And then next question, because it
Right.
was a question that wasn't worthy of further discussion. Make sure you're not one of them. So I guess that's the answer. Sounds kind of cold, sounds a bit arrogant, but frankly, reality is kind of cold and hard.
It really is. We've been lucky enough to seemingly avoid living in reality. A lot of Americans for a long time, where we haven't had much harshness to deal with in our lives. It's pretty good here, even now. And I think under pressure, I just worry about how, I don't know, people are going to fold.
I understand that the average American watches about 4 hours of TV a day. Even here in Uruguay, I'm doing that because right now we're watching Game of Thrones. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Right.
Not Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, House of Cards.
Okay. Yep. I have not actually. I've only made it to maybe through the second or third season in that.
Oh, well, we're up to the 5th season now, and it becomes more and more and more like the Washington that I know exists, where these people, where it's a giant, dangerous snake pit. But getting back to what I'm saying, so it's not that TV doesn't have any value, but it's a question of marginal disutility of everything.
Right.
And maybe 4 hours a day of TV is about as much as you should do. That's the average for Americans. But then the same article where they quoted all these studies, people study this stuff, says that the average American spends over 4 hours a day on this electronic device, computer, or mostly cell phone these days. So I guess if you sleep 8 hours a day and then you got another 8 hours with your electronic devices, maybe that leaves 8 hours for exercise, eating, taking a shower. I mean,
Not much
we're
productive
really,
activity there.
listen, we're moving into a new reality.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. I
There's
feel
no
like,
time to read a book about that.
well, I think I think you have to force yourself away from screens. You have to really manage your screen time, because especially these handheld devices, these mobile phones and social media. Doug, I know you never really got into that, and it's a good thing, because they are essentially they are programming devices. I mean, they are, the news feed that you see on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram is all It's an algorithm designed to keep you engaged for as long as possible. And, that is pushing buttons basically that, cause usually a negative response in you to get you engaged, to get you pissed off about something. But you're programming your brain that way. You really are programming your brain. And I think that does make us go, again, force people to retreat into the smaller existence in a smaller world, isolate themselves more from other people, like you said with the feudal society, because there's dragons over there. And the other people who don't believe what you believe are probably friends of those dragons. We should stay far away.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I don't know what we're going to do about this, Matt. I don't know what you or I, as individuals, or even together, can do about this. In fact, what we are doing is at most just sowing discontent among people out there. And I'm sure the powers that be don't like to have people sowing discontent.
Well, yeah. I mean, are we making people more? Yeah, I think maybe we're helping people recognize the problems that are going on. And I guess I can sow discontent, definitely. But I think that, yeah, the power to be different. I mean, eventually, if we actually get a reasonable audience on YouTube or anything else, Doug, clearly we're going to be eliminated. We're going to be wiped away. We're going to be canceled. But well, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Everything changes. I mean, you know, the mountains are going to be worn down to the sea eventually. So
Eventually.
you can't expect anything to last forever.
No, exactly. Well, I think one of the things I'm trying to do, if there are viewers who know of different events that are going on this summer where people are actually getting together face to face in person, if there are events that are happening like that, I'd love to know about them. I know of a few of them. I mean, we have Freedom Fest coming up, which Doug, you're supposed to be at and speak at this year. Hopefully you make it for that. I bought my tickets, so I'm planning to be there.
Yeah.
And I know there's New Hampshire has this Pork Fest thing, right? And I know Jeff Berwick has his anarcho poco, and they're having apparently a remote viewing of it, like so that basically they're having like a viewing party for it at someplace in Texas, which we may go to too, actually, because which I thought was an interesting way to do it. Allow people to get together, who don't otherwise they won't want to deal with the travel problems and going in and out of getting tests and whatever else. So I know of those, but if there's others that people know about, I'd love to know. So leave them in the comments for us, and maybe my family and our RV might show up.
Yeah, well, I might be too if it's within driving distance of wherever I am, which is kind of like double questionable. Yeah, right.
Lots of unknowns right now, Doug, as far as what's going to happen. I think keeping your options open is important. So if you have the capital, the financial capital, I'm trying to just make sure that my options are as open as possible. And one thing I should do, obviously, is I should get back on that second passport stuff, because clearly that's going to become, you said 11th hour, and you were obviously right. And I, as a student of yours for so long, have never bothered to get one. Although I do have a Paraguayan residency. I do have that, but I don't have my passport.
Well, you've got to get on a plane and get down to Asuncion, and you've had your residency for long enough that you can probably just take a very simple language test and pick it up.
Yeah.
You should do that now as opposed to later. And incidentally, just a fun fact, I mean, Paraguay is one of the easiest countries in the world to become a second citizen of. You have to be a resident, or you have to have your resident document, I should say, for 3 years, but you can get your resident document in one day, and you hire the right fixer, completely legal, incidentally, and he or she will, bring everybody to their office, fill out the papers. 3 years later, you come back, and you should be able to pick up your passport.
Well, I'm at that stage. I'm past it at this point, so I should definitely. I might ask you for that fixer's contact information offline, just to follow up, just to make sure steps I need to take. But yeah, that's something we need to do. I need to do it.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate it, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Okay. Great, man. Thanks.